Moving forward into actually building the top railings now and laying on the steps, I want to talk about this step real quick because this is going to be really important. If you're scratch building your own walkways and railings on a tank car like this, pull in this one again. Starting from scratch, you now have no starting point to indicate where you need to lay these out, and they have to be completely flat. You don't want these to be off like this, you know what I mean, where you have them crooked or something like that, where you're looking at the tank body and your railings are crooked. That'll drive you crazy. You want to get these right the first time. You don't want to have to correct this. It's not the end of the world if you have to correct it, but right now we want to try to get this on the first take if we can. So the key here is to line everything up by means of taking the car body, positioning it as flat as possible, and kind of just doing the old Mark 1 eyeball check and seeing how everything lines up. Now that's not lined up there, I can obviously see that, and I know where this needs to be. It's going to be right there pretty much. And what I've done here is once I've eyeballed this and positioned it using the reference lines on the tank body, and also obviously using the eyeball and checking it from both ends, I've been able to determine exactly where this needs to be positioned. And once I've done that, then I can actually take the old stock Atlas railing piece and use that as my guideline for where this needs to be located, which is of course very helpful. What I've done is I've laid it on the tank body, and then I've traced out the inner pattern onto the tank body, and basically from this point I can then take my photo etch pieces and I'm going to glue them right on those lines, and that's going to be my exact position. With these OLNX cars, those railings are pretty much mounted right on the top of the tank body. So if we look at this prototype photo here, they're literally right on top of the tank body. They're almost level with the top of the tank. Matter of fact, on some versions of these cars, this whole walkway actually goes all the way across the tank body, flush on top. And I am going to be building a variation of that on this one back here. This one in the back, well, excuse me, hang on. This one right here and this one right here with the little GPS domes, those are going to be OLNX. This one is going to be a TILX. And with the TILX car, I'm going to make this with the whole platform. So that'll be a different build. I'm going to have to use some different photo etch parts like these to make the full length platform, basically. But these that I'm making right now are just the standard single individual walkways, just like these UTLX cars here, the stock Atherns. And yeah, basically once you get all this done, I recommend you just do this all in one shot. Get everything traced out first. Use that as your reference. You can get all these other cars done the exact same way, and you'll be good to go. Then it's just a matter of taking your photo etch pieces, adding your supports, gluing them in place. Don't worry about the railings until these are positioned first, and then we can build the railings. And again, these are just Plano photo etch walkways. These are from the LPG walkway kit, which I got a couple of 303 spare kits because they make some really good walkway sections like these here that are really nice. And I use these and cut them down, and then use all the other spare parts for different LPG builds, tank car builds, etc. So anyways, I'm going to be doing that now. Just took a little bit of styrene, made my own little walkways, and by the way, I'm using thin strips of styrene here, which I bought from Hobbytown. The styrene I'm using to make these little platforms is 020 by 040. There's your measuring, and there's the item number. So if you guys want to make your tank car platforms, walkway platforms, or anything like this, this is pretty much one size fits all. I use this one size for all of my tank car platforms because they're sturdy and durable, and they're pretty well scale sized, and they'll work perfectly for this tank. These don't need to be super big on this particular car. So I'm going to go ahead and position these, and then I'll make my little studs to support the walkways and glue those to both my tank car bodies here. So I have all the scratch built railings done, and the hatches are installed on all three of these. So, like I said in the last clip, what I did here is I made two for an OLNX version where they have the more standard walkways, two-piece walkways, one walkway on each side, and then the railings for those two. The TILX version is a solid platform, so that's just a solid steel walkway. And so that took a little bit more fabricating. I just had to take some photo etch pieces and slice them up a little bit and then glue them to some framework, which I then glued to the top of the tank body. I then made a little support for the hatch and installed the hatch there, and then built the railings like normal as well. So I think they look pretty good overall. The only thing I had to do, the compromise I had to make, was I initially wanted to do the railings with actual stanchions, where I made actual stanchions from styrene. So this would have worked, however, trying to align everything with these pieces on the railings themselves and trying to glue them down just proved so tedious that I ended up reverting back to my old method of just installing the railing itself first and then cutting stanchions to size and fitting them underneath the railings to support them. So that was the compromise, but it still turned out okay, and all in all, I'm pretty happy with that. I think they look pretty good. It's the most finished these cars have really looked at this point, other than they're still missing the side railings, or the ladders rather, and then the end railings. But for the ladders themselves, these should fit just fine. However, what I'm thinking about doing, well, you know what? What I'll probably do, I probably will just go ahead and install these, as long as it doesn't hinder having to mask the tank body. I don't think it'll be too much of a big deal. I think it'll actually be fine, because I'm going to be only masking these sections, outer sections, once the whole car body is painted. Keep in mind, the whole car bodies on all three of these are going to be painted white first. Then I'm going to mask everything off and do the black. So black underframe, black bands for each. So I actually can get away with installing the ladders now. So that'll actually save me some headache. And then what'll come after installing the ladders is making the little brass support at the base of the ladder. There's a little stanchion that comes off the handrail there and connects and supports the bottom of this ladder. So I'm going to have to fabricate, let's see, 6 of those, 2 for each car, both sides, once I get the ladders done. And then, other than that, these cars are ready for paint. It's taken a long time, a lot longer than I initially planned. I started this project more than a month ago, and it's definitely taken some time here, but well, quite frankly, it's taken a good part of the summer, to be honest with you, but pretty limited with modeling time right now, and I've been trying to focus my effort on other projects, so that's why they've been taking so long. On top of that, my little tripod mount broke. So this is why I'm having to hold the camcorder, which added a whole other layer of frustration to this. But anyways, I'll get that replaced. But that being said, pretty happy with the progress. I also have had to take a couple breaks to work on other projects, because I've got a lot of cars that I'm trying to wrap up. These are all going to a guy, and then this one's also going to the same guy. I'm doing these in exchange for some stuff that we traded, so I'm doing work in exchange. So I'm not doing client work, this is just a trade. But so I had to jump ahead through painting here just to get this done real fast, but I wanted to show you guys where this is at. The entire tank body is painted white, as you can see. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to start masking the black. Thankfully, all the black wraps around the car body, and it all comes from this section here, banded around. It's just right above these jacking pads on the bolster or the tank saddle, whatever you want to call it. So masking this should be pretty easy. I'm doing one first, just as a test. I measured out the bands of tape all the way across the car body, and then I'm going to cut bands of tape that will wrap around, all the way around, and then everything else will be masked end to end. Same thing on both sides, and hopefully everything will be even. And then once I get all that done, I'll be able to spray the black, and we'll see what that looks like. But at least painting for the most part went pretty well on these. It was a little time consuming, and white is generally a harder color to paint, so it did take a little bit of time, but hopefully once these are gloss coated and the black bands are on and everything, they'll look a lot more finished. So this is what this is going to look like. You can see I've wrapped the blue band all the way around to meet the other side. And now I can start filling in these sections and then run the band across the end. That's basically how you do this two-tone paint job. It's not the worst thing to do. It can be a little bit tricky, but at least we're not having to work around all the brake rigging components and things like that, because that would get a little bit trickier. If you're doing a solid band where everything else was just white, then I would definitely say that makes it a little bit trickier because you got to work around the brake components. But in that case, you just have to go in there and do a lot of little tape sections to cover the bands first, very carefully, and then mask over everything else very slowly. And just like that, we're ready for painting. You can see everything's nicely wrapped up real tight. So hopefully we don't have too much overspray, but no worries if we do. We can always just touch up the white a little bit, and then of course after we gloss coat everything, it should be blended in pretty nicely. So very satisfied with the wrap job. Here's the car post painting process, and the black sprayed really well. I know a couple people have asked me this, and I've answered the question before, but just so it's here on this video too for anyone new who's interested, the black I use is an automotive style black paint. It's available at most, I'd imagine like AutoZone, Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly's might have it. O'Reilly Auto Parts anyways. It's basically a flat black, and it was a paint that I was chasing for a while. It used to be available at Walmart, and then Walmart stopped selling it, and it's only like 89 cents, maybe 90 cents a can. But the paint sprays really well. It's super flat, super clean, and especially doing tank cars, you need the paint to be super thin. And so in this case, I was able to do the entire car with that paint, and it turned out pretty good overall. So I'm very happy with the finish. At this point, I've let it dry for a couple hours, and I'm ready to peel all this masking off, and I'm going to inspect the whole car body and see if there's anything that we need to touch up. Of course, we'll have to touch up some paint on the end there. There's a little area where the black just wasn't spraying in all the way. I can touch that up with my black acrylic, which is another reason, by the way, I'm using this particular paint. This particular black matches almost perfectly with the acrylic flat blacks that you can find like Americana, or if you still have it, the good old-fashioned Anita's black, which I've ran out of, unfortunately. And I'm actually about to run out of this, and that's going to be a really bad day when I run out of my earth brown, because it means I'm going to have to find something that's similar to this, and I can't so far. So that's not good. Anyway, side addendum there. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point here. The reason I'm using that black, mainly not only because it's super thin and flat and paints well, but because it matches the acrylic colors really well. If you need to do touch-up, it blends in really well. And then once you gloss coat or dull coat, can't even tell that it's blended in. So anyways, all that's been prepared, and we'll take the masking off. And at that point, we'll do the touch-up, do some detail installation, which will be installing our little hooks for the end railings. We'll install those, and then gloss coat the entire car, and it'll be ready for decals. I'm going to do this process for the other two. The one that I have at hand here is the TILX version, so I need to get decals for this one. Once I get those, I'll be able to decal it, and then I have decals for the OLNX cars already, so I gotta prepare those, but I think that's pretty much it. So far, so good. It's definitely taking a little bit of time, but it's because I have so many other projects going on right now. I'm doing some hoppers and some other stuff right now, and I got all my UP power out that I'm refurbishing. So anyways, keep trucking away at this. We'll see what this looks like. We got success. Happy with the finish overall. The tape did not damage anything. I did use a newer Scotch Blue Painter's tape for this, a low tack sharp line tape. That being said, I still cut my own lines with this because you want really sharp lines for your separation points, especially with two-tone, really any masking in general. But it wrapped really well, covered really well, so the band is nice and clean. As you can see, the separation lines are crisp, except for a few little points, as you can see. And as expected, there are a few little rough edges on the ends that I'm going to have to correct. So we'll just have to scrape those down a little bit, and then that'll pretty much take care of that. But yeah, everything painted really well on this, so this process will work for sure for the other cars, but definitely a really striking paint scheme. It's like the tuxedo paint scheme for a modern tank car. Alright guys, well, they're all painted at last, and I gotta say I'm pretty happy with how things came out. Some of the lines were a little fuzzy, and they're still not perfect, but they're okay enough to continue on with the decal work and everything else. So all three are painted, as you can see. This is the TILX, and then these are the OLNX cars. With the OLNX cars, I also went ahead and painted the little platforms black, and I added the little car track tag, or the GPS tag, whatever that thing is. I just did a little silver Sharpie trick to a piece of styrene, and then glued that to the platforms to make it look like those little pieces. So I'd say that was a cool, nifty little trick. For all of these, I did a high gloss finish, of course, for decaling. And overall, I'm very pleased with them. I'm glad that this build is over. I'm glad that I now have some finished cars, and I'm definitely glad that I don't have to build any more of these. So at this point, what we're going to see next is the decaling phase, and then you'll get to see one of these cars finished, and we'll wrap up this video here because this is starting to get a little bit longer, I guess, than I initially planned, but that's okay. It just gives you guys a little bit more material, a little bit more fat to chew on, if you will, to be able to learn how to do some of this, or really just kind of troubleshooting. In terms of other details, we still got to add the end railings, of course, and I'll paint those. Add the little handrail like we talked about. And then other than that, I'll just kind of decide if I want to do anything else to these. I'm probably not going to install the coupler lift bars. Again, I talked about that just because of train handling and things like that. An in-service car like this, I get a little worried about parts like that, especially if they're a second-hand application, getting busted off, just because the detail parts are a little bit tedious to install, and when they go out on the model road and get ran for a couple weeks, and then you find your air hoses are missing, or a couple of lift bar gets knocked off, it's just annoying. So, you know, I got to decide if it's really worth installing on these. It would look nice, it would really complete the look of the model, but you know, it's just one of those things. I'm just kind of simplifying things. As long as I have the actual car body itself and it's semi-detailed, it looks okay, then I can accept that. So, in terms of some other things I'll bring up here, I ran out to the hobby shop in Columbus and I picked up a couple pairs of Athearn Genesis roller bearing trucks. These are going to be used for these cars. I got 4 pairs, so I actually have all 3 pairs for these. And then I have a spare pair in the back here, which I'm going to use for another tank car build coming up soon. So we're looking pretty good right now. So yeah, the next shot here, you should be able to see the TILX car, which is the one we're going to finish first. You'll be able to see this one fully decaled. Another little thing with this that I ran into, I talked about having to get custom decals made because, for one thing, I don't have a font for the pencil thin TILX OLNX font. It's a pretty common stencil size for these tank cars. I had to get that made by Circuit City Decals. I had placards made and I had stencils made. For the data, I'm going to be using Smokebox Graphics decals. Their Helvetica tank car decal sheet works really well for this, so I'm going to be using that decal sheet to do all the data, just some of the technical stuff. And I'll show you guys some of the decals when it actually comes time for decaling. Alrighty boys, get excited. We're in the final stages here, and I know you guys are dying to see all the art on this thing, and it's a really, really nice job so far. However, I need to stop to show you guys something else that I discovered while doing the build on this car. Okay, I'm having to stop this because I think that this is going to be an important step to show exactly what I'm doing, and this is only an issue for me because of what I'm going to be doing to finish this car. All my tank car builds, I'm going to be using the Athearn Genesis spinning bearing trucks because most of the tanks that I have, they have those crappy roundhouse looking trucks that Athearn has switched to. I absolutely can't stand these. These are ugly. Granted, it's nice that Athearn is now doing the stencils on them, but the truck frame itself, it just looks like garbage. You have a highly detailed model and then they switch to these when they used to have this truck, which I wish I had about 100 pairs of this truck for tank cars. By the way, if you guys have sets of these specific trucks, let me know. I'll buy them off you. But it has to be this style. I believe this is the 36-inch wheel, although I could use a couple pairs of 33, so honestly 33 and 36-inch wheels. But these are really hard to find. This is the earlier RTR, like what came on these. The issue is, since I don't have a pair of these on hand, or at least 3 pairs of these to upgrade all 3 of my cars that I'm doing, there's the other 2, finished, painted, and decaled, I'm having to use the Atherogenesis trucks. Now, the problem with the Atherogenesis trucks is that these will not fit the best on an RTR car. You have to sand the interior a little bit, so the screw hole just a little bit to fit over the RTR mount. However, if you do that, fine and dandy, but once you screw this back on, this truck will not screw down all the way and it'll wobble really bad. And it's a common problem on all the tank cars I've done with the Atherogenesis trucks. So this clip is one where I'm going to show you guys how I remedy this. Let me show you what I'm making here. This is a little interior washer. I'm scratch building some washers for each of these trucks, and essentially this is 015 styrene with a piece of what is this? Let's see. Yeah, so this is 040-inch styrene with a sheet of 015-inch styrene glued to it, and then I've drilled a little hole through it to fit the screw. A little hard to show here, but the screw will go all the way through, as you can see, and leave us just a tiny little nub of screw. This whole piece will then go inside this truck, and once we screw this down, it'll be nice and tight and it won't wobble, if that makes sense. That's the remedy that I've found to fix this problem. So I'm going to be making a couple pairs of these now to fix this. So hopefully this will solve the problem. All I did there was I added the shim, installed the screw, and now there's no wobble in the side frame compared to this side, which has lots of play. So it's a pretty good solution, honestly. That being said, there is one other little thing. Let me pull this one back in here. There we go. Okay. The Athearn trucks have these little pieces that stick up that are part of the brake gear. I'll show you these little pieces here. You're going to want to shave those off to make this work just right, because these will catch on that bolster. So you need to make sure, if you're going to do the Atherogenesis truck modification with any RTR equipment, that you shave these down, and then if you do a similar modification like this, it should solve the problem. Anyways, that was just a little trick there. After this, I'll go ahead and actually show you guys the progress we've made on this. Well, alright guys, we're at the end of this build, and we now have the first completed model, and this is where I'm going to wrap this video up. I will show the other two here in just a second, kind of the progress of where they are at as we wrap things up here. But overall, this was a real hell of a build, and it took a lot of time. We started this project in June this year, and we're already towards the tail end of September. I can't believe how fast time flew. This really did tie up a lot of resources and time, but it was well worth it in the end, because I really honestly have the most complete build I think I've ever filmed on this channel. It's also the most labor intensive, but hopefully the most detailed for you guys who want to know how to do this stuff on your own. I'm really hoping that this helps you out in learning how to build cars like this, and this will not be the last one. That being said, I will not be doing 3 cars at once ever again like this. This was a real learning lesson for me, and so this kind of goes to a point that I also want to use to conclude this video as well before we look at this model. If you're starting off a project from scratch or anything like that, take small chunks off at a time. Don't get so aggressive like I did, where I went in and just built 3 cars. And I only did that because I wanted to have 3. I knew I wanted 3 at least. I wanted to get them done as fast as possible, get them done, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll get those done, film everything, it'll be fine and dandy, and I'll just jump right into some other projects. And that was a big mistake, because it tied up a lot of time and a lot of resources. So yeah, I definitely learned my lesson here, but all in all, I'm very thankful I filmed the whole thing, so hopefully you guys are really enjoying this series. I got some really good feedback on the last video as well, so I really appreciate that, guys. And a lot of people asking if these are for sale, and the answer is no, I'm not going to be selling any of these, I'm sorry. There's just too much work and too much time in them, and besides, if I turned around and tried to sell one of these now, on top of even trying to ship the thing with all these detail parts, these would probably be brass value in terms of labor, cost, materials, and everything else. So anyways, I'm just happy the project's over. But anyways, Some final things I did to this are obviously the decals, and all the decals for reference were done with Smokebox Graphics decals. So Smokebox Graphics decals for all of the car data and stenciling, hazmat placards, and other little stencils. Those are all off that sheet. The hazmat numbers, things like that. The only thing I got made for this car was the chlorine inhalation hazard decals. These are not readily available as far as I know by any manufacturer, and believe me, I've checked. So I had to get those made by Circus City Decals, and I also had a special font of decal made for the other two cars, which I will go ahead and show you guys, which is this sheet here. And this is a compressed tiny font lettering that's commonly used on roads these days. It's been used since 2006 era, I believe. And I'll show you the other examples of these two cars that have this lettering. I specifically got this lettering made for those decals. And of course I got matching numbers made as well. So I had custom decals made for that, and then everything else was Smokebox Graphics decals, which worked out really, really well. Smokebox makes the best Helvetica tank car data. Overall, in terms of weathering, I just did some white washes to simulate some of the chlorine spill, a little bit of fading, a little bit of rust around that hatch, some dust, high traffic area obviously on the top there, so there's a little bit of chipping and things like that. The underbody obviously has all the good old kick-up effects and splatter and kick-up from the trucks, of course. A little bit of paint patching here and there. There's a look at the decaling, which is all nicely sealed in with dull coat. Unfortunately, I had a faulty can of dull coat for this car, so I got a really wavy clear finish on this thing. Fortunately, in the right lighting, and especially out on the layout, which is most important, you can't see it, but fortunately for the other two, I'm using a brand new can of dull coat, which eliminated that problem, but that just kind of caught me off by surprise, so that's what that little wavy effect is in some of that. It's not that it's textured, it's just that it looks kind of bubbly. It's just this weird way the clear coat will dry, so you'll have to kind of pardon that here. Obviously we did the work on the trucks, installing those washers. That got the trucks nice and tightened up a little bit, and then final assembly was to install our end rails and make the little bracket for them. All that turned out really good. You got all the nice kick up on the ends now. I really like that kick up, especially on these two-tone cars. It just looks super awesome. And that kick up also. Of course, installed the couplers. Same thing on this end as well. And then on this side we have pretty much the same thing. Of course I added my Western Safety reflective tape striping, and that really completed everything up. So overall I'm very satisfied with the build, the way the paintwork came out, and the way the decaling came out. In terms of painting these, I definitely learned some other little tricks that I will use for other two-tone cars if I get around to some, because I definitely would like to at least maybe build one more chlorine car, and I would like to build another sodium hydroxide car, a specific sized 16,000 gallon prototype. I don't know if I'll film that one when I actually build it, but that's another potential build that I might film that'll have a two-tone scheme like this. So I learned a lot building these. I honestly can say through all the headaches and late nights, you know, because I was putting in a lot of hours on these things. I stayed up at some points till like 3 o'clock in the morning just trying to get decals done and paintwork done, but that's what it takes sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of work in this, but honestly, I'm just really glad it's done. I think it looks really good too. I really like that little car track platform there. I think that's really odd, but it looks really cool. I think it just completes the look of this model. Just to show you guys where I'm at with the other two cars, as you can see, they're in the process of getting sealed up here. I'm on 3 coats of dull coat now, trying to get these decals sealed up. It usually takes about 5 or 6 coats of dull coat, sometimes 7 coats of dull coat, to completely conceal all of the decal film and make it look like these are stenciled. But I like all the work, especially on tank cars, to be nice and clean and uniform. So brand new coat of dull coat's getting the job done here. But as you can see, all the lettering is in place on both of them. There's the OLNX car and the TLX car. Real quick, I'll show you what the decals look like on the ends here. Not really the best view, but you get the idea. Anyways, all coming along here. Really satisfied with how things are shaping up. Be done here in a little bit. But I just wanted to show these in this video, that way you guys could see these. And probably by next update video I'll have these hopefully weathered and finished. and I can properly show these in detail for the next update. So we'll go back up to the workbench and conclude this video. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this build. I want to thank you all for watching and sticking through this whole thing. Hopefully you learned a thing or two and can apply some of these techniques hopefully to some of your own personal builds. I will have another build coming here very shortly and an update and some other things working in the pipeline, so you guys can stay tuned for that. So make sure you're subscribed and following closely to see what's next. Thank you so much guys. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.